ReefDudes is sponsored by Brightwell Aquatics and Bulk Reef Supply.
Today we're going to get a long overdue update on the Frag tank. What's going on, guys? Devin from ReefDudes. Now, I'm way overdue for an update on the Frag tank. I've definitely had a few little hurdles getting everything set up. I know we did kind of the bare bottom setup on this, moved everything in, and at first I had a bit of dinos in the tank. So what I did to kind of partially combat that was use a bit of Dr. Tim's waste away, a little bit of peroxide, and I overfed the tank like crazy on purpose to boost those nutrients up. Now, the fallout of that is the dino went away, but then a couple weeks later, boom, whole tank was full of hair algae, bits of Bryopsis. It was looking pretty bad. So tons and tons of algae in there. Just because I had a bit of Bryopsis as well, I decided to bring out the big guns, and I got some fluconazole. Now, if you guys haven't used that before, it is an antifungal medication, and it works amazingly well at getting rid of hair algae or Bryopsis. So I added that to the tank, and I actually did a double dose of it. And I let the tank sit for about 2 weeks before I turned the skimmer or anything back on. And 2 weeks later, absolutely pristine, not an ounce of algae in the tank. So that stuff does work very, very well. Now overall, I'm gonna say things are looking pretty darn good in the tank. The only one thing is I do have a little bit of dino back, so it's a little bit of a vicious cycle, and dino's a bit of a pain. Now, I did already take my UV and put it on the water box, otherwise I would just throw it on this tank and let it do its thing. So one thing that I have been doing now is starting to dose just a little bit of 3% hydrogen peroxide, and this actually does help with the dinos. And I think in the near future I might actually get another UV and just put it on this tank and just be done with it and not even worry about it. So once I get rid of that bit of dino in there, I think we'll be back to a happy place. Now the corals themselves are actually all looking really awesome, so getting lots of good growth in there and everything looking pretty happy. Gear-wise is an interesting one to talk about too. So as you guys know, I went with the GHL as the main controller on this tank, and so far so good. It is definitely a little trickier to set it up until you get your head around the way they do things, and once you do, then it's not too bad. And I actually did just pick up expansion cards. This is a pH and redox card, so we'll get that installed today. So we'll have to pop that open, install the expansion card. That's mainly just so I can use the ORP probe in the sump, and then for the future calcium reactor, once that's rolling, then that will be another way to control it. Now on the flip side, I also have been testing out the Hydros. So CoralView Hydros, that's been quite a bit of attention around it, fairly new controller. And got the little Wi-Fi power bar there, so this has been up running as well. So it is kind of crazy overkill running two controllers in tandem, but it's a good way to test subject it. Now with the Hydros, the few sensors that I got so far, I do have a water level sensor down there. And if that one ever gets too high, it'll shut off the filter roller, shut off the skimmer. Might even make it shut off the Clarity. Not the Clarity, the turf scrubber. Also another one, I really love the sensor. I have the little skimmer saver, whatever it is, from Auto XP Aqua. And it's in the skimmer in my big tank, so if the cup's ever full, I'll shut it off. So super cool to see Hydros teaming up with them and using some of their sensors because they work really well. So I love that it goes right through the cup. So hasn't quite triggered it yet, but we'll test this one out pretty soon. We'll hopefully hit it. Same thing, Clarity. So a few different things. Basically the stuff on this half of the tank I am running off the Hydros. The other one I'm going to hook up to is the leak sensor, which I think is super cool. Either just put it around the base of the sump or the base of the sand. I just got to find a nice way to like tuck it in there and use that. So if anything does trip it off, I'll get an alert, can have it shut off the skimmers or it pumps potential stuff that is causing a leak. Not too much fancy for control there, but I also got the NIOS on there. So those are kind of the four things running. Move that over later. We have the pH probe and the temperature probe and all that jazz on here as well. So it is kind of cool to be able to see both controllers, compare things, make sure everything's all good and happy. Now the Hydros app itself has been pretty solid so far. I love that interface is wirelessly with the Alcatronic, so I can see what my elk is, and see what my pH is, and all my sensors and stuff right out the front. So I do actually got to put the other two in there. So far this is the Clarity and the skimmer programmed, and the rest are just always on, but I just installed that, so I'll set that on a timer. And I did go back with the clear water scrubber. Now one thing that's great about this guy is it keeps your sump nice and pristine. Do have to change that purple pipe to match, but got this guy installed. And one other kind of cool addition, Josh sent me their newest little add-on, which is, I don't know if we'll be able to see it, but it is a little cover that goes on top of here, and it's just like a C shape, and it makes sure it directs all the water downwards so you don't get any little stray squirts. Keeps the light off of the top of it, so there should be no potential algae blocking flow. Just hooked this guy up today, so it will probably take a week or so to seed it, and then we should start getting some turf algae on there. Wire-wise, I just put some little magnets up here. Just kind of sprayed them white, but just super simple little wire management and easy way to tuck it up. So super cool thing about having a steel stand, magnets are amazing. Now, so far for the supplementation, we have been using the Icecap Kalk stir. And this guy is actually working pretty darn well. I haven't even had to turn the calcium reactor on yet because this has been taking care of it. I think I'm doing just under 1 mil a minute, so using the Versa, and super slowly doing it, but I think it's set to 0.9 mils per minute. And that is feeding it. The only one issue I had so far is I did have a few times where the magnet came off, so I think what they call it a spin out. So it spins too fast, whoosh, falls off. I do turning the speed controller for this down all the way to the lowest setting can quite help, but still happen once in a while. So I actually took it apart and measured the base of it, and I believe it was 60 millimeters. And I ordered and replaced the magnet with a new one that was a bit bigger. And from what I read online, if you match the stir magnet to the base magnet, there's less chance of spin out or anything happening. So I did that last week, and still a bit cloudy, but you can still see it perfectly centered. So that has absolutely fixed that, and it's been even extra solid since then. So super cool design. If you need to top it off, there's a little cap on top, you just put in a scoop or two. The recommendation, I believe, on the website from CoralView was 150 grams. I've been doing 100 grams in there, and it seems to have been working pretty well. After about a month, I cleaned it once and just refilled it, but yeah, so far so good. Now this is fed from the Versa. See back there from my ATO. So I got a 10-gallon ATO, and inside of there, which I think was super cool, because I got that little Flood Guardian. Right there, you see the little magnet on there. And that is hooked up to my RODI unit. And I wanted to feed the kalk reactor from that, so my ATO probably doesn't kick on that often. Majority of the time it's being supplemented with the kalk. Now I didn't want to have to refill that because you can see it's hidden back there all the time, so I used the Flood Guardian, and the GHL has it on a timer, so every 4 days it turns on for 4 or 5 hours. It opens the valve. Now when it opens that valve, it refills my ATO for me. And I do have that little magnetic sensor in there to shut off the solenoid if it's ever an issue, and you can't really see it, but there's also goes into a float valve. So I put a float valve in the top. So I got multiple levels of redundancy. We got the timer, only lets it run for so long. We got the optical sensor, and we got a float valve. So we got 3 different levels of redundancy, and it makes my ATO refill itself all the time, which is pretty awesome. And back in here, we also got the CO2 tank. I kind of left just enough space for this stuff, and that will eventually be hooked up to the calcium reactor once, you know, stuff starts to grow and have a little more demand, which so far I'm actually really honestly amazed how far kalk has been taking me on the tank. Like, everything's been growing, you know, all the polyps are out, stuff is super happy. So overall, I would say the Frag tank is doing pretty good. Just gotta get rid of that little bit of dino that's left in here, those lovely nasty stringy things. Which, to be honest, I'd rather see that than all literally fuzzy covered in algae what it was a few weeks ago, so much better place to be. Okay, so let's pop this guy out. Couple of hex heads on the bottom, and we should probably power this down first, so I'm just gonna unplug it. And that's what the inside of a GHL looks like. And this is just going to slide into the first expansion card. Then the one other key thing is you have to go back in the software and tell it it's there later, so you just kind of add it back in. So it won't quite work yet until you say, hey, new card, this is what it is. And things are happy. So I'm not going to worry about that one quite yet until we get the calcium reactor rolling, but figured I'd get it installed just to kind of button, clean up all my wiring in the back and less stuff to rearrange or deal with later. It's a bit of an overview update on the Frag tank. Fluconazole absolutely does wonders for getting rid of Bryopsis and hair algae. Works really, really well. Did a double dose, no adverse actions from it. So most recently added the turf scrubber in just to handle nutrients, because I do plan on feeding this tank heavy to help with all the coral growth. Now I know it's gonna take a couple weeks to kick in. Usually it's a good 7 to 10 days to seed it and let all the hair algae start growing on the clear water scrubber. So I'll start that now. At the the same time, just hopefully finish on dealing with the rest of those dinos. Probably add a UV at some point to this tank just to avoid the hassle altogether. On the other front, the Icecap Kalk stir has been working well. I did have a few issues with the magnet. That was the stock one. Since I replaced it, I believe this was around 50 something mil, and I think the one that I did was 60 mil, but if anyone really wants to know, I'll go dig in my Amazon history and figure out what I actually ordered. But since I put in a slightly longer magnet, it's been rock solid, so that's been awesome. Hydro, so far so good. Everything's been working on it. It was pretty easy to set up. When I was adding it, the first time I had the power bar, it didn't work. I'd reset it, tried again, then it worked. Aside from that, it was super duper easy setup. I think I did film some of that too, so if anyone wants more of an in-depth one on that one, I can definitely finish that video off later. Overall, with the GHL, initial programming was a little tricky to wrap your head around because you kind of like, you know, you take a timer and you assign it to an outlet, or if you want to do like a feed mode, you assign that to like the timer. So it's just the way you chain stuff. Once you kind of get your head around it, it's not bad at all, but it took me a little bit to figure that out at first. So it's not quite as intuitive, but once you get the hang of it, it's not bad at all. I did find you could do most things on the app. However, I found if you use the web version or plug it in a computer, you could do a lot more quicker and easier. Could just be that it was easier to find in the menus rather than digging around, but it's nice to have the options of connecting it multiple different ways. Growth-wise, the coral's doing awesome. Everything's looking good, so I'm pretty happy overall. Once I get rid of the dino, we'll be rolling. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this update. There's a lot of stuff kind of mashed into one because I'm way overdue for an update. If you guys have any questions on anything, as always, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. Want some awesome shirts, check out reefdudes.com/shop, and I will check you guys out on the next video.